The one absolute thing is to trust. Trust in yourself and not surrender or submit, but just acknowledge and accept that this is a period of your life that you have to go through in order to get out the other side and to see the beauty in the opportunity of being released from a relationship that isn't working.
This is the Uncoupling Podcast, the podcast where we optimize the bodies, brains, and lifestyles of entrepreneurs, go-getters, and world-changing innovators.
Welcome to the Uncoupling Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Walker. As an anthropologist and naturopathic doctor, I optimize the health and performance of badass women working to change the world as entrepreneurs and go-getters. You know, people exactly like you. Your business, body, balance, and inner badass, these are the themes that we are exploring. Before we jump into the interview, I want to invite you to join our free Facebook community, Legacy. If you want to be something amazing, you need to surround yourself with amazing people. The Legacy community is made up of badass women living, not leaving, but living our legacy every single day. We are leaders, parents, entrepreneurs, and innovators collectively committed to leaving the world better than we found it. My mission is to support the health and optimization of these badass superheroes, literally to places we never thought imaginable. If you are on a mission and get it that your health is the key to your unlimited potential, then join us. We are super awesome. You can find us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/groups/BE Legacy. See you there. So I don't know how else to describe my next guest other than to say that she is a divorce doula. Diana Mikas is someone that I have known for a very long time, and I have so much admiration and respect for her journey and her passion for helping women. Diana's mission is to reach all women who are going through divorce, separation, or breakups and help them to recover from the trauma and recharge their bodies while reclaiming the life of their dreams. Diana experienced a divorce after nearly 20 years of marriage, a life, 3 kids, and what she thought was a consistent and predictable path forward. Listening to her journey and the insight and the power with which she reclaimed her life is nothing short of inspirational. I would never have really thought of this topic as being something that is so profoundly important to the life of an entrepreneur, but to really someone's health in general. It's something I would talk about in clinic, but never systematized or created a framework on how to recover from this experience in one's life. I am forever grateful for the work that Diana is doing. I am happy to refer people to her work as they go through these transitions in life. And I am reassured about the idea that we can go through very traumatic experiences, that our life can shift trajectories on a dime, but that those shifts, however painful, have the power to move us to unbelievably powerful places. Diana has incredible wisdom to share. Whether this is something that you have experienced yourself, you will inevitably know someone who is going through divorce, and what a powerful resource to be able to share with them how to reclaim their power after they go through this traumatic change. Such a pleasure to introduce you to my friend, Diana Mikas. Diana Mikas, welcome to the Uncoupling Podcast.
Thank you very much, Megan.
Well, I'm
pleased to be here.
Well, I'm really excited to have you. You and I have known each other a long time, and we always digress into really fabulous conversations. So it'll be nice to record this one for posterity. But I want your work and your journey and the evolution of where you are has been profound, and so much of what you are doing now is a direct reflection of that. Take us through the story of who you are and how you got here, and the really amazing work that you're doing.
Thank you so much. Yeah, well, I mean, it has been quite the journey for sure. I think the first time you met me, I was working in advertising and marketing in a very stressful, high-profile agency downtown, and did that for years and years. And while that was happening, I was going through my divorce. That was actually the beginning when we first met. And so what basically led me to what I'm doing now is exactly that. It's kind of like a 360. Here we are again, introducing why I started that whole journey. So I was married for 20 years and, of course, thought I had fallen in love with my soulmate. We planned our lives together. We had a fairy tale wedding. We had 3 kids. Life went on as all lives do. And then things started to fall apart. Our values started changing. Our goals started changing. And it was a profound shift in the way I saw my life going forward. And we did everything we possibly could to keep it together. We did counseling for years, actually, couples counseling and couples weekends and all the things you can possibly think of, we did. But things just showed big cracks. And it led to the demise of my 20-year marriage. And that really was the beginning of this big shift in my reality. When we decided to separate, the first lawyer I saw said, this could go one of two ways. The best case scenario would be if you both agreed and you were amicable and we could just get a mediator and everything would be fine. And then the worst case scenario, of course, is if there was disagreement, conflict, we'd have to go to court. Basically, she told me about this horror gong show, and I was horrified by it. And I said, "Oh, this isn't going to happen to me." And as soon as you say that, well, it does happen. So 5 years later, 4 lawyers, 2 court appearances, I was left at the end of this life of marriage and bliss with nothing. My house was gone, my family was dismantled, my support network was divided, and life as I knew it was completely gone. I was in trauma. I was in trauma for the 5 years that I went through it, and now I was left with this new reality. So this caused me to really have to take a look at what my life was and why am I here? And it was a huge existential crisis, you can imagine. And when I came to see you was when I was at the worst of my health. My hair was falling out. I couldn't think properly. I was weak. I was having cold virus after cold virus. And that 2-year-long yeast infection, remember that? I don't know if you remember that, but that was quite the issue. And of course, I had to have a look at my health throughout that whole process. So when the divorce was finally over and all our, papers were signed and everyone had to go their separate ways, I felt like I had a clean slate. And I had a clean slate to look at my life, where it was, meant to go, and what is this new path that I'm on. And I immediately just dropped everything. I quit my stressful job. I took a one-way ticket to India, meditated for a month, got perspective, came back, and re-educated myself in the healing arts, and thought there's got to be more to life than running around trying to pay for bills and doing something that doesn't make me happy. So I became a Reiki master, a holistic nutritional consultant, and a life coach. And through that process, I decided that my personal experience through this traumatic period was one that I needed to share and educate women about, and how they can mitigate the long-term effects of the trauma that they're going through. And that's kind of it in a nutshell. That's why I am doing what I am doing with heartbreak.
Well, it's so important, right? Because at the surface, everyone's like, "Oh, I've experienced heartbreak," but there's a trauma to divorce that is different, because there's so many facets to it, and it's so stressful, and it's common, but unless you experience it, it's really difficult to articulate all of those different elements. I have a lot of questions for you based on that on that introduction. First, I actually just want to acknowledge something that was really clear to me as you described that. And afterwards, when you said, so I totally changed my focus and I grabbed a plane ticket and I went to India and I decided to meditate for a month. And I was like, that is not a typical response. And what's cool about it is it was such a brave response. you came out of this traumatic experience and you're like, no, I'm not, maybe you were wallowing, but you were like, I'm going to take some sort of action to move me forward. And going to an ashram in India is not necessarily what most divorced individuals first jumped to. What compelled you to do that? And where did you find the bravery to be like, screw it, I'm going for something totally different?
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, it did take a lot of courage to do what I had done. But remember, I had 5 years of trying to separate, and it was the most intense, traumatic 5 years of my life. And it was like being in purgatory or limbo, where you're not able to move forward, you're not able to get on with your life. There was no opportunity because of the gridlock that I was presented with. So I had some time to think about, how I was going to deal with this when everything was said and done. So it wasn't, divorce. You're right. It is not a typical. It's not a typical sort of trauma that you go through. It is all intensive. It is all consuming, because you're not just dealing with, say, for example, the trauma or grief you go through when a loved one dies. You're going through that type of emotion of loss, but you're also going through the trauma of financial trauma, your complete network falling apart. Like your life in all aspects really does fall apart. So, I mean, I was kind of at that point just wanting to just go forward in any possible way. And the only way I could see going forward was to okay, here's my clean slate. What do I want? Really, I had to sit down and talk to myself and say, okay, what do you want to do next? You've got this wide open road in front of you, and there's nothing encumbering you now. There's no mortgage. Of course, I had children still to deal with, but there was none of that other stuff that I had to deal with for years. So India was not my first choice. That was not at all something that even occurred to me during the 5 years. But I was lucky enough to be able to have a life coach at that time. And she helped me unpack a lot of what I was going through. And she presented the opportunity of, okay, well, why don't you just sort of get perspective? And to me, that translated in a long trip far away. And I had never wanted to go to India because I knew I was going to get sick, because of my digestive issues. But it was absolutely the right thing. And it was the best thing that I had ever done for myself. And since then have gone back 3 other times.
I love it. I love it. Sometimes you just have to leave. You have to get out of the box completely to understand what it is that you were living in and had built around your perceptions and beliefs. What is it coming out of all this? There's not going to be one thing, but is there a piece of advice looking back on that you wish had been given to you, or now you want to give to other women as they are entering into a divorce, when they understand that this is going to be an inevitable next step? Is there one thing you just want to be like, if nothing else, do fill in the blank?
Yeah, if there was one thing only, I mean, I have lots of things that I could possibly give as advice, but the one absolute thing is to trust. Trust in yourself and not surrender or submit, but just acknowledge and accept that this is a period of your life that you have to go through in order to get out the other side and to see the beauty in the opportunity of being released from the marriage relationship that isn't working for you. There is an opportunity to basically renew your life after it. So accepting where you are and trusting that everything will be okay.
I love that, which is so hard to do when you're in it.
Yeah, very hard to do when you're in it. Very hard.
Gwyneth Paltrow talks about this notion of conscious uncoupling. Mm-hmm. Is that possible?
Yeah, I do believe that it is possible. I mean, for me, it wasn't. I tried that. But I really do believe that is possible, depending on your relationship with your spouse, depending on how you communicate how you respect each other. I've experienced many, many couples and many clients and friends and family who have gone through exactly that type of uncoupling. It's a beautiful thing if it can be achieved, and if you have a partner where you've had good communication with, so that will happen.
So heartbreak is something in a broad sense that you are focusing on with your work now, and it's something we can all relate to. Take us through the anatomy of heartbreak. What are we feeling?
Yeah.
Why are we feeling it? And so that, because sometimes when you understand it, you understand how you can come out of it too.
Yeah, heartbreak is, like I had mentioned, it's a really tricky one because it encompasses so many different elements of pain. In fact, there's actually a term called broken heart syndrome. And your brain actually thinks that the body is hurting, just like that feeling of being punched in the stomach or your heart being ripped out. The area of the brain that gets activated when you're physically hurt is the same area that's activated when you suffer a social rejection, which is also like a romantic rejection. It's the posterior insular cortex that gets triggered. And with that rejection, love is strong as addiction, as they say. It's addicting as cocaine. And you're getting all these amazing neurotransmitters like dopamine, oxytocin, and serotonin. They're all activated when you're in love. And then when you break up, you actually go through a physical withdrawal as if you're going through a drug withdrawal. And it's so traumatic that it's been likened to PTSD. It's a type of PTSD that you go through. And I call it post-traumatic divorce distress.
I like that.
And yeah, and you actually have to go through all the 5 stages of grief, just as if you are acknowledging the death of a loved one. You are acknowledging a death of your life in a way. So what actually happens to the body is, first of all, you go through shock. So when you're blindsided, or even if you're not blindsided, you still go through a period of shock and your heart rate actually drops. And once the shock is over, that's kind of like the first shock and bewilderment that you experience when you're going through grief. And then when the trauma starts to set in, that this is an actual reality that you're having to live, your emotional stress gets charged up and you start to question, did I do something wrong? Am I going to be alone forever? Do I have to start adopting cats? This type of thing.
Okay, so that's a normal part of the thought process.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and then, of course, your sympathetic nervous system gets ramped up and your cortisol spikes, your inflammation levels increase. And then you start to see the physical reaction. So your sleep and your digestion, your immune system gets compromised. You might be up all night. You lose your appetite. You might even start catching colds and viruses. And in very rare cases, there's actually a study done that concluded that emotional distress can actually precipitate heart damage, even when the patient doesn't have coronary heart disease. And it can be triggered by the exaggerated response in the sympathetic nervous system. So the trauma can actually precipitate an actual physical ailment. And I've seen this several times throughout the past few years. And once you feel the physical pain, you go through all of that, and then you go through sort of an anger period, and you're not thinking straight. And you're missing appointments and you're becoming impulsive. So your critical thinking skills start to decline and your lack of self-control starts to show up. So you dive deep into things like Haagen-Dazs and you go on wine binges and you want to just watch Netflix for hours and hours and hours. And then once you pass that stage, you go through denial and bargaining and you start to go back onto the Facebook page and check out your partner's activity and you torture yourself. There's a bit of self-sabotage that goes on then. And the areas of your brain show increased activity again, like craving a drug because you need that high. You want to feel that oxytocin again. You want to feel those great neurotransmitters. But in the end, what you're doing is making yourself unhappy, because you have to be at the point now where you have to pull away. And this also comes into play with your neuro, your neurofeedback, and you're getting the uptake, but you're still being disappointed and you're still having that heartbreak. So this is when you accept that you have to pull away, and then finally you go through a period of isolation. This is when progesterone levels increase and you start feeling lonely and you start to isolate again, and you don't want to see people, you don't want to go out. And then after that, finally, you reach acceptance, and acceptance that the relationship wasn't good for you, and that perhaps this is the best thing for you to move forward and to find somebody better. And that's basically the anatomy of the journey that you go through.
And so what do we do when people get stuck? Because I have girlfriends, I have patients, and I'm listening to what you're saying. I'm like, oh yeah, I can see all of that. But then I have a number of people in my life who I feel like are stuck in the lonely.
Yeah.
And they just can't get past that, or they can't get past the betrayal. Like they just stop, an abrupt halt. Are there things that we can do to support them, or are there resources for those people? Because I know those people will often know they can reach a place of acknowledgement where they're like, yeah, I'm lonely, I'm upset, I'm grieving the fairy tale, not even so much the person anymore. How do we get them out of that?
Yeah, that is a tricky period, and that can prolong for sure. And it's kind of like they're stuck in the denial phase, and you're not willing to accept that you need to move on. And the first thing that I do when this happens in my scenarios with my clients and anybody else who comes to me in that stage is, from your point of view or from their point of view, everyone needs to go through basically an optimal pain point, and they just haven't hit that rock bottom enough, and in order to make the shifts necessary, or they've just sort of plateaued. So my advice to them is be gentle with yourself. This is where you sort of reframe your internal critic that comes up time and time again, that tells you you're not worthy, you're not ever going to love again, you're not going to find somebody, you're going to be alone forever, you're going to start looking for cats. So this is when you really have to look at your internal voice, be gentle with yourself, practice forgiveness for your part in it, practice compassion for yourself, and start reaching out to networks, start reaching out to family and friends who make you feel good and boost your sense of self and your self-esteem.
So you mentioned forgiveness there, which I actually think probably wasn't on accident, but I also think it's such a compelling concept. There was, shifting gears, but coming back to it, there was a study that looked at, what is it about people's brainwaves that we can put them into a state or induce a state where they're in a maximum state of creativity and flow and accelerated cognitive function. And Dave Asprey has this center called 40 Years of Zen, and this is what they do. And what they found was that that hacking brain waves where we put people in this optimal state is the same brain activity that we see when someone achieves forgiveness. And I don't think this is by accident. It's certainly not something I know a lot about, but I feel like the finding forgiveness and working towards that is like one of those really key fundamental things that is required to move on. Do you see that in the clients that you work with?
Absolutely. It is key. Forgiveness for themselves and their role in the breakdown of the marriage, and forgiveness for their partners, forgiveness for everybody else. But most importantly, it has to be about forgiveness for yourself. And, I love David Asprey and what he does and all the studies that he does. And it really is it is very much a spiritual type of growth that you have to go through when you go through this trauma. It is an existential, life-changing shift in your whole being, and you have to look at it as an opportunity to see your life and see how you are in your life from a completely different perspective. It is an opportunity to forgive yourself, and furthermore, it's an opportunity to forgive the stories that you were given from your parents around relationship and everything you came into this life knowing and being taught, because that's the ultimate factor that keeps us in suffering is the foundational stories we were modeled and what we were told throughout our lives. So it really goes back to not just the present trauma that you're in, but it really goes back to the very beginning of your life. And like I said, the foundational beliefs that you have around what it means to be loved and to give love.
So what kind of conversations did you have with your kids as you were going through this process? Because you would have been aware of this component. You would have been aware of the fact that this would have imprinted on them. What sort of things did you share with them?
Yeah, well, I've always maintained a really open dialogue with my children. So that was key. So it wasn't like I blindsided them. And I shared things that were appropriate throughout the whole process. And I made it really clear to them that what was going on between my ex-spouse and myself had nothing to do with them, and that they were still loved and supported, and that their lives weren't going to change very much, that we were always going to be there for them, and nothing, they didn't have to fear, things going away or things changing too much.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's so critical, because you want to be able to understand. My parents were divorced. You want to be able to understand that this is one of the outcomes that can happen with respect to marriage and relationships, but it's not the only outcome that can happen.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have some fabulous resources besides yourself, of course, that you have suggested for people as they are transitioning through this piece? I always say to practitioners, people aren't always ready to talk to another human being about it. Sometimes they just kind of want to hang out in their cave and read a little bit more about it first. Where do you suggest people go?
Yeah, there's some really great books out there for sure. My go-to that I always start with is the 5 love languages. And I always start with that because it really identifies why your relationship broke down, and what was the miscommunication, and how did you miscommunicate. If you understand where the disconnect was between your values and how you, because it really is about communication at the end of the day. If you understand how you miscommunicated, then everything else kind of falls into place. Then you understand so many more other aspects of why the marriage broke apart or fell apart. And then there's the New Codependency by Melody Beattie. That's also a great resource. We tend to get into, patterns, again, codependency type of patterns where we're enabling our spouse to continue their bad behavior. And so this helps us identify how we contribute to the breakdown as well. Those are the 2 resources that I always go to. And of course, there's me. And then there's, of course, when you get to...
I love how you just slipped that in there. That was brilliant. Well played.
Yeah. And of course, if it's really severe, therapy is a very important aspect of going through a divorce. I'm a coach, so I'm not going to deal with the real pain triggers. I'm going to help you move through them. But when you need to dig up those pain triggers and really get down deep and dirty to your core muck, emotional muck, then a therapist has to be called upon. And I always work hand in hand with therapists as well.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful partnership for coaches and therapists to work together. In a nutshell, and people hate it when I ask questions like this, but I'm going to do it anyway. How does one get over heartbreak? I know there's people who are sitting there just make it stop. Let me get out of it. I want to move on. How do we get over it?
Oh, I wish there was just a magic pill. I wish.
By 4 o'clock today.
Yeah, by 4 o'clock today, one magic pill. I'm going to just put it all together. Really, you have to allow yourself to go through it. The only way to the end is going through it. And, it all depends on you, how you want to go through it. You can be a stubborn person who just is in that denial and doesn't want to move forward. And your grief will, of course, elongate, it'll prolong. The suffering will prolong if you don't allow yourself to go through it as quickly as possible. I wanted to go through it as quickly as possible. And that's what I do for my clients and anybody else who comes to me. So the first thing I say is honor your grief. Allow your grief, cry as much as you want to, just get through it. Just don't stop it from coming, and don't shut down your feelings. The second one is take care of your body in the process. That one of those grief triggers where we don't have our cognitive ability in place and we make bad decisions, like, having drinking binges, or deciding to go to a sex club and just, do all kinds of things that you didn't do when you were married, and or, eat all kinds of yucky food that your body, for sure is not going to, help you in the process. So continue to take care of your body. In fact, ramp it up. This is when you really need to start eating properly, start doing more restorative exercise, not go to the gym and hardcore it. Long walks with friends, gentle restorative yoga, that type of thing. Number 4, don't isolate yourself like you want to. Reach out to the friends that you know who are there to support you and encourage you. That is key to keeping your neurotransmitters, functioning properly. And then, of course, don't jump into another relationship too quickly, because this is your opportunity to reflect. This is your opportunity to take the time to see what happened and reframe your beliefs around your relationship and learn from what happened. Because if you don't allow yourself to go through this type of trauma in these ways and learn from your lessons, you are destined to repeat over and over and over again. And nobody wants that.
Yeah, okay, so let's talk about the repeat over and over again. Because are there things that we can do coming out of it? And we just talked about 4 steps following a breakup. So I don't want to reiterate that piece, but are there some fundamental shifts in mindset that can protect us from this happening again? Or is this just part of the human experience? If you are going to love fully and it doesn't work out, you're going to have to go through these stages each time.
Well, it is part of the human experience of having heartbreak. But how you eventually learn from each heartbreak is really dependent on you, and it doesn't have to be that way. And you don't have to go through the trauma every single time. Like I said, it is a learning process, an opportunity to really take apart and unpack what your definition of relationship is and how you are in relationship. This is the opportunity to dissect it. And you can't do it alone. It's hard to, remove yourself from yourself, unless you can go to India and just, meditate and really get into it like I did. Not many people have that access. So this is where you take the opportunity to really dissect your thoughts around relationship and reframe it, because obviously this one time didn't work very well. So like anything, just like learning how to ride a bike, learning how to run a business, learning how to be more effective in speaking, whatever it is a learning process. And in order to get better at it, you have to learn from your mistakes and then do better.
Such good advice. Do men and women divorce differently? Or is it just that we're all different people?
There is a little bit of difference in the way we resolve divorce or breakup. Absolutely. Men tend not to want to take that time in their pain. They will do everything to get out of the pain, get back on the horse, get back into the dating pool, get on the way to, dating sites. They're the ones who quickly find a partner regardless. They tend not to want to acknowledge their participation in the breakdown of the marriage. They are reluctant to, because it's a big ego shift for them. It is something that really, really does question their ego and their fundamental way of being. And for men, it's a difficult thing to do. So they are destined to repeat more often than women. Women really do take the time to learn from it in a certain level. Even if they're in limbo, they're still thinking about it. They're still processing their relationship, and they're willing more to do the work around mindfulness, therapy, and learning from the mistakes to do better next time.
Yeah, I think that description is important. And as you were describing that, what it created for me was a whole series of questions that would now be in my awareness if I were dating again and you were dating individuals who had gone through divorce. Is it really being honest with them about how they came through that and the retrospective work that they did on the other side?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one of the key questions I always tell my clients when they're jumping back into dating, and if they're dating somebody who has also gone through a divorce, and you want to kind of make sure they've they've learned their lessons, the one key question to ask is, have you figured out your participation in the breakdown of your marriage?
Mm-hmm.
And that will tell you loads as to whether or not that person has learned their mistakes and whether or not they're basically trying to be better in relationships and that they're going to work on it with you to be better. That's key because you really don't want to fall into a relationship with somebody who's not willing to learn and grow with you as you are.
Absolutely. I would maybe caveat that with not on the first date. Don't ask that question on the first date.
Yeah, well, you'd be surprised. It really does eliminate a lot of unnecessary dating once you get to the core of the issue.
That's true. That's also like you also triage early, right? Absolutely. Yeah. Diana, what do you want your legacy to be?
I just want to make a significant contribution to what's going on with the consciousness and empowerment of women.
Yes.
All over. It is so inspiring to see how women are growing and just coming into their power in the world. Really inspiring. And I just want to be part of that wave. I want to contribute to that. I want to contribute by writing books. I want to contribute with my workshops and really just continue the conversation around empowering women to recover quickly from this type of trauma and helping them fall in love with their lives again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and not the illusion of what they thought their life was, but their life for real.
Yeah, absolutely.
When they're their own best friend.
Absolutely key.
How would you define health?
Health to me is really encompassing everything. It encompasses mind, body, and soul, and the alignment of all three of those. And when I talk about alignment, I talk about what your true life purpose is, so that you're acting and speaking and living your truth around what you feel your true life purpose is, and how you're meant to be better in this world.
Each month, I'm featuring a new anthropology quiz to help you unlock and uncover some of the physical performance blocks that may be holding you back from your true potential. When you know better, you can do better. To learn more or to take the quiz, head on over to meganwalker.com/anthropology quiz. Such great food for thought, and a perfect transition to the last component of the interview, which I call our KPIs, or key performance indicators. So these are, just like we would have in business, markers of how our business is doing. I believe we also have actions that we take in our own lives that give us an indication of how things are going. So indulge me. I've got 6 quick questions for you.
Okay.
Don't be scared. There is no math. There is no pattern recognition. You've got this. Okay. Do you have a consistent morning routine? If so, can you share?
Oh yeah, absolutely. My practices in the morning are key. If I don't do them, my whole day goes off. The first thing I do is I meditate. I don't even get out of bed. I first meditate, and sometimes it's a guided meditation. And because I'm a Reiki master, I protect myself energetically. So that's key for me. And then I slowly wake up doing some breath techniques. And then I don't have children with me anymore. So it's really, my time is my time in the morning. So I take my time. I don't rush to check my emails. I don't even turn on a computer or a phone until a good hour and a half after I've done my morning practices. I get my smoothie going, I do my supplements, I slowly have a shower, get dressed, and I take my time.
Stop talking about your morning like that. It's amazing.
Yeah, thank you. It's key. It's key.
I'm slightly envious. Fiction or nonfiction, what are you reading right now?
Oh, I'm all about the self-help books. It's crazy. And I have several books going on all at the same time. And the one that I'm reading that's an actual book is Living Dangerously by Osho. And then I just, I whip through all these amazing self-improvement books. And the ones that I'm reading right now are High Performance Habits by Brendon Burchard.
That was good.
Yeah, and How the World Sees You by Sally Hogshead. It's one of my favorites.
Oh, I like it. I'm writing these down, even though they will be in our show notes. What is one thing you are most consistent with respect to your health?
Nutrition. Nutrition is key for me. It consumes me. I am, I'm not a fanatic about any particular diet, but I have figured out what my body needs, and I stick to it, and I don't ever stray. Like, I will absolutely never have any type of sugar. I will never have any type of gluten. I will always have, for me, the way my body functions is I need the 6 smaller meals. I'm not into intermittent fasting. My body does not like to do that. It feels like it's dying. I'm a vegetarian. Yeah.
We're not just like, that's not my thing. It's like you're fully dying if you do that. Okay. I like that.
Really, that's what it is. And I am, of course, plant-based diet, but I do eat animal protein occasionally, fish and chicken, and I'm diligent about making sure I consistently eat throughout the day, and I have a certain amount of protein throughout the week. Yeah, that's key.
What is something totally badass about you that people would not otherwise know?
Oh, badass. Oh my gosh. Lately, I don't feel like much of a badass. But for me, I'm a bit of a risk taker. And I don't mean like physically, like I'm not going to do like, alpine crazy helicopter skiing or anything like that. But I like to push myself and put myself into scenarios that are uncomfortable. So social scenarios, like I will just get up one day, and if I know there's some, either a concert or some sort of performance or an event that I wouldn't normally go to, I'll just go there on my own. And I love to do things on my own. I don't need to have anybody with me. In fact, I prefer it when I travel. I prefer it when I go and explore. And that for me is the best learning experience ever. It gives me the opportunity to engage with people and just continue to learn and grow and meet new people. And because of that attitude, I know people from all over the world and all walks of life. And to me, that's what makes my life rich. And I guess that's kind of badass.
It is totally badass. What do you do for fun or play?
Lately, in this cold weather.
Yeah, no kidding, right?
I go to the spa as often as possible.
You are my guiding light right now, Diana. Slow mornings, and you go to the spa for fun. Keep going. You're filling me with my ideas.
Yeah. Well, when you have those opportunities, it's I feel it's so important just to recharge and to regenerate. We live such stressful lives, and I take my downtime seriously.
Beautiful. Last question for you. Entrepreneurism. Are we born this way, or do we learn to become entrepreneurs?
I think we're born this way. I mean, I think you can force yourself to be an entrepreneur, but you're not really. You'll just be going through the motions. Entrepreneurs are, have incredible courage because you got to do everything. And we're born this way. Either you got it or you don't.
I love it. Just right in there. You speak from experience. Diana, it's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Tell us a little bit more about where people can find you, and we will hook them up with all of these links in our show notes.
Awesome. Well, you can find me on my website, and my website is mylifecrush.com. So just My Life Crush. And I'm also on Facebook. I'm on YouTube. I'm on Instagram. Again, My Life Crush. Just search for that. And I'm also starting a series of workshops. On February 17th is my very first one, and it's called Love Lessons Healing Heartbreak Workshop in Toronto. And you can find all that information on Eventbrite.
I love it. And do make sure that you tag us as you are promoting those things, because I want to make sure that we keep our audience up to date with what you're up to, because your work is really important. And this isn't something that I think anyone or everyone even knows they're going to need you in their life. But when they do, I'm really glad that you're there for so many people.
Oh, thanks so much, Megan. I really appreciate it.
If you enjoyed our conversation and would like to hear more, head on over to Stitcher or iTunes and subscribe to the Uncoupling podcast. We would also really appreciate a quick review. When people have their health, they can change the world. Let us keep you healthy and you go change the world.